Shadow the Hedgehog is one of the most popular Sonic the Hedgehog characters of all time, in both a genuine and ironic sense. Genuinely because he arrived in a game that would be monumentally popular, and ironically because his characterisation became so edgy over the years that it couldn't not be made fun of. He's the perfect encapsulation of the attitude that dominated Sonic's foray into the early 2000s, and his anti-hero demeanour was established perfectly through modifications to Sonic the Hedgehog's established Sonic Adventure design. In the modern day, you probably love him or hate him, but his popularity can't be denied, even if he is basically just a hedgehog version of Vegeta from Dragonball Z. But regardless of what we all think, his design is a memorable one that's appeared in a huge amount of Sonic the Hedgehog games over almost a decade. Holy crap, does that make me feel old. But which game nailed this look better? Well, that's the point of this video. We'll go through a brief history of the character today and look at the different design iterations he's had since he chaos controlled into the series. I'm the Artist Mark Flynn, and let's find out which Shadow the Hedgehog design I think truly is best. Before we get started today, I'd just like to thank Skillshare who have sponsored this week's episode. If you're not familiar with Skillshare, they are an online learning community with tons of courses available, ranging from graphic and character design to video editing tricks. Pretty much any skill quite literally can be developed through use of the platform, and a huge amount of these courses are also entry level. In the past, I've learnt basic animation and how to refine designs for my own merchandise, but most recently I took the logo type masterclass with Jessica Hish. This course has been a great insight into how to develop logo type from the ground up, and Jessica's unique method of doing so has really given me some inspiration to go back to some of my older design work and refine it for use in the modern day on this very channel. Maybe I'll rebrand in the not too distant future. Skillshare is super affordable with a yearly subscription costing less than $10 a month. Luckily today I've got another offer for you all, and that is a 2-month free premium membership for the first 1,000 people that use the link in the description below, so you can explore your creativity. So if you've got some time spare and would like to learn something new, I'd really recommend Skillshare as a way of developing the content you create. Anyways, back to the action. Shadow was created by Takahashi Iizuka and Shiro Meikawa, who led development on Sonic Adventure 2. Originally named Terios, which translates to reflection of, he was designed to be a cool, dark mirror image of Sonic, and this is something that definitely took some time to develop. Initial concepts of the character were far less refined and much more primitive, displaying a character who looked very much like Sonic, at the expense of him looking like his own character. The first of these concepts displays him with a scar over one eye and a very dark colour scheme, and really does look like a recolour of the character with a few extra details added. It's a low effort Sonic OC by today's standards. The second concept builds on this, experimenting with a few more colours, though his shoes take a step towards their final form. Later concepts are more unique, incorporating more of the character's final colour palette between them both. His shoes are also further developed, with emphasis being placed on the square-like form factor and grinding slots. Finishing off the concepts are angular spines, a slightly modified chest shape, and longer ears that separate him from Sonic's original design. These are all pretty wacky looking concepts when you know how the character ended up looking, and I think it's a miracle that they went back to the drawing board. These look like such cliche villains, and as far as Goku and Vegeta comparisons go, they are definitely on the Tails scale. They definitely don't capture the vibe that the developers were going for. The design they landed on for Shadow was a huge improvement on each of these, and while at a base level, yes, he was an evil Sonic recolor, the comparison with these concepts makes you realise all the little details that went into making him memorable. It does make sense to start with his colour palette. His body was black, with red highlights adding emphasis to his angular, supersonic style spines, and similar highlights were also present on the corners of his eyes, which also happened to be blood red, as well as his arms and legs. While his ears and mouth were similar to Sonic's with a slightly different tanned colour, he had a white muzzle on his chest in place of Sonic's round. I really don't know how to explain what this is. Particular emphasis is placed on the character's space-age style trainers, and while they've retained the form of Sonic's classic shoes, they also feature small jets on the soles. This would address why the character can run as fast as Sonic, but the game never actually insinuates that this is why he can keep up with the blue blur. As well as this, the character has rings at the base of both his trainers and gloves. The game's original promotional artwork was the first depiction of this character, and absolutely nailed the presentation of it. with the in-game model doing a great job of replicating its style. The beauty of having a character debut in the Dreamcast era was they could clearly display a similar appearance in a 3D model. In the past, I've mentioned a strong dislike for the designs in Sonic Heroes across the board, specifically the glossy character models and renders. So I'm going to fast forward past the second appearance of Shadow the Hedgehog, who was brought back to life amidst a sea of popularity, and instead I'm going to jump straight into his most notable feature, his own game, Shadow the Hedgehog. Yes, this is the game with the guns, some super memorable cutscenes, it's cheesy as hell, and it's perceived by many to be a low point of the series. But I'm not going to repeat any more of that stuff. Let's talk about his design. I'm in two minds with the Shadow from Shadow the Hedgehog. It's an equal 50-50 split. In-game, Shadow uses another very glossy character model, similar to Heroes, and I'm really not too fond of it. In fact, I'd say it's a huge step down from his original character model in Sonic Adventure 2, and disappointing considering that this is his only game as the main character. But the CG cutscenes in this game, magnificent, sublime. Sure, the plot in this game is hokey and nonsensical, but they absolutely nailed Shadow's character design in both the cutscenes and promotional renders. Sega has managed to show off some considerable 3D animation chops over the years. Unleashed's intro is probably the best example I can think of, but prior to the release of this game in 2008, this was the first time I noticed a considerable improvement in pre-rendered cutscenes in a Sonic game. The quality of Shadow and the rest of the cast models in these cutscenes was off the charts, and much more impressive than what we'd seen in Sonic Adventure 2 and Heroes prior. This Shadow retained a similar look to what had been established in his original appearance, though he was far smoother around the edges, features like his spines were a bit more relaxed, and on the whole, he's a fair amount stockier than his original artwork appeared at first glance. For the next decade or so, changes to Shadow would be relatively minor. He re-emerged in Sonic 06 as a playable character, alongside the Hedgehog trio of Sonic and Silver, who oddly enough was basically Trunks from Dragonball Z next to Shadow's Vegeta. His inclusion lacked any real impact if you want to compare them though. Let's face it. Anyways, before the Silver Squad come after me, here Shadow was slightly taller and thinner, much like the rest of the cast. His look was basically an upscaled, more detailed version of how he was presented in Adventure. This was refined and changed in line with Sonic's updated appearances in future games, as Shadow would appear in Sonic Generations as a non-playable rival character with a compacted model that was again more in line with modern Sonic. His voice actor also got 100% worse.
You've got this, Sonic.
This model would remain very similar for future appearances, with Shadow dropping into Sonic Forces as a playable character for the first time in years. There's not much to say about these designs though, it's definitely a logical evolution for Shadow in line with the rest of the series, and at its core, the design still looks great, but it's not my favourite iteration of the character by any means. His biggest change ever came with Sonic Boom, the reboot we've mentioned a few times now that quite literally changed up every member of the cast, sans Tails. Outside of the two-tailed fox, best character design video coming very soon by the way, Shadow appeared mostly the same as he did in the rest of his appearances. He is, however, slightly taller and slimmer, with his quills having smaller spikes that protrude from them much like Sonic's from the same title. His outfit is largely the same. Both his shoes and gloves have been extended and are longer with red tongues and red and black cuffs. The size of his golden rings has also been altered, with the ones on his ankles visibly larger than the ones on his wrists. Ultimately, it feels like a minimal change, and if anything, I'd say it overcomplicates the simplicity of Shadow's original design. It feels like a change to his outfit for the sake of making something new. Honestly, I would have preferred that they did an absolute crazy redesign just to give us something to remember. Maybe they should have brought back this guy. Maybe they should have given him a Wanderer's cloak to match Sonic's neckerchief. I don't know, it just didn't stand apart for any good reason. Like many characters featured in this series, Shadow has been no stranger to spin-off games, featuring in Olympic games, storybook games, racing games, and many other games that feature the full cast. Like other characters such as Mario, Shadow typically uses a design that is relevant from each era in each of these, though there are a few exceptions that changed his design for the better. I'll start with the original Sonic Riders. Before it used a graphic style that was very much in line with the rest of the Sonic franchise and spin-offs, it featured a unique art style that blended the art of Sonic Adventure with a rougher, sketch-like fluidity. A few characters featured slightly amended designs with this change in genre and style, and Shadow was one of them. Featuring a new pair of goggles to go along with the racing aesthetic, the shading style complements Shadow's spines and angular shapes very nicely. Laces have also been added to his air shoes, which is a very subtle change that makes the character feel that tiny bit more relaxed and casual. It's one of my favourite Shadow designs, despite not really adding that much new, and it's an art style that meshes perfectly with how the character already looked. Next up, Sonic Battle was a fighting game for the Game Boy Advance, featuring pixel-based sprites very reminiscent of the style established in the Sonic Advance series. It's been mentioned tons in the comment sections for my Sonic videos, and I'd held off mentioning it purely because I think this game nailed Shadow better than any other characters. Given that Shadow didn't originally appear as a playable character in the GBA platform games, it's technically the closest we've ever had to a classic pixel-based Shadow design so far. It's a really nice sprite that has some fluidity to its movement, captures the key features of the character scaled down very nicely, but it's not where Sonic Battle succeeds the most in my opinion. Sonic Battle has a huge amount of style when it comes to presenting the character via in-game portraits and promotional artwork. The game attempts to roughen up the cutesy cast of characters a bit, sharpening their edges and presenting them in a much sharper and rougher style. It's like a scaled down adventure style of artwork with thick lines and cel shading, which helps give the characters that extra fighting game punch. Though this is done to the whole cast, it works incredibly well with Shadow. We've seen his spines and quills take different approaches over the years, but here they are pointy, sharp, and help give the character the edge he definitely needs. This sharpness extends to other features. The purple outline also works really well with his dark colour palette, and it makes for a unique design that suits the character perfectly. So one thing that must be apparent if you're still watching the video at this point, and that is how, at its basis, just how little Shadow's character design has changed over the past 19 years. Even in games that completely shook up the franchise and the full cast of characters, Shadow's appearance has remained very consistent, and that's because quite frankly, they nailed his character design right from the get-go. Chaos controlling into best design territory after a short battle with Sonic Battle is Shadow's first appearance in Sonic Adventure 2. Yet again, it's all down to the artwork, which perfectly captures the character's attitude in his debut entry. This isn't the first time Adventure 2 has pinched a win for the Sonic games in my Best Design series, which is something I find pretty crazy, as I'm definitely a bigger fan of the classic and even some of the modern games, especially when it comes to Sonic's design on the whole. But with the case of Shadow, it's a very different story. His arrival in the franchise was at the peak of Adventure's highs, and he really does benefit from the art style that these games presented. He was specifically designed around contrasting the Sonic from this time period, and they definitely achieved their aim, presenting him as an equally cool and appealing foe with plenty of unique traits. In fact, his popularity has almost been detrimental to his integrity, as the decision to keep him around has forced his future appearances and accompanying designs to alter based on how Sonic has looked in each title. While there's nothing offensive with the character's descent into differing graphic and art styles, he doesn't really come close to hitting the highs of his original design to me. Sonic Adventure 2 presents him as a great anti-hero, and he's probably one of the Sonic characters who best suits this lankier style of character design. He appeared as a more serious and mature character from his origins, and this gelled incredibly well with Sonic Adventure 2's attitude-based artwork. Recent appearances of the character just feel like a toned-down version of this original, super strong design, and while we mock him for his edginess, he has quite literally lost any edge he had without this design supporting him. So that's it from me, but what did you think? Is there a design that you prefer? Let me know in the comments section below. At this time, I'd like to thank my patrons who help make videos like this possible, with a special shout out going to Krug Slade and Proggy Froggy. If you'd like to help the channel out, please consider heading over to my Patreon.